Perek Yud. Hilchos Shavuos Perek Yud. Okay. Everybody ready? Yep. Hilchos Shavuos Perek Yud. This Perek also discusses, like yesterday, the laws of Shavuos Ha'edus, laws regarding testimony. And the laws regarding the Shavua a person takes that he doesn't know any useful testimony, which turn out to be not true. Okay, how you what if someone says to two people, I demand that you come and say testimony because you know testimony is helpful to me, and they say we swear we don't know any testimony, and which of course is not allowed. They swear we don't know any testimony, and they're lying, which of course is not allowed. And it turns out one of them is disqualified for testifying for whatever reason, or is a relative, which a relative can testify, but he can't testify for you, testify for somebody else. Even if the reason why he's disqualified for testifying is with Rabbanan. So, for example, a person who is violated a mitzvah deraisa, or a person who is someone who's been caught lying in testifying in the past, is possible biblically. What if he's possible rabbinically? For example, he violates the second day of Yontif, or he's a serial gambler. He makes most of his living from gambling. In different cases with the Chum pass on certain people. One of the two witnesses was the king, and the king of the Jewish people does not testify in court. It's not respectful. And all these types of people are not fit to testify. Or for example, somebody who didn't actually see what happened. He heard two reliable witnesses relate what happened. So he's testifying what he heard from witnesses. He's not testifying what he saw. And in Torah, of course, you can't testify what you saw. It doesn't count. And they deny, and they make a shvu. They don't know any testimony, and it turns out that they are lying. They know what they know from the situation. In other words, either they saw it actually happen, but they're relatives to the person, or the psulim, or they're simply lying about what they heard from witnesses. In which case, it's irrelevant. They are parted from the testimony of the isser of testifying falsely regarding witnesses. She'ilu ha'idu. What's the next word in your Rambam? Ha'idu or ha'idu? Okay, so even if they had testified, even if this witness did get up and say, I know testimony, and he says what he saw, or this person who's a Machal Shabbos gets up and he says what he saw, or this guy who's a regular person gets up and says, I heard from Reuven and Shimon that they saw what happened, well, in this moment, their testimony would not be chayiv to anything, because that's not valid testimony. So you're only chayiv the carbon of making a false shvua when you're lying and you say I know nothing. That's helpful to you. If you would tell the truth, you'd be effective. If you're telling the truth is ineffective, you're lying. Then it's not considered a false shvua edus. If I administer an oath to you that you come and testify on my behalf, if this individual said to me, they promised to give me 200 zuz, they did not give it. When the guy denies it, he's lying. They are putter for the lying about their shvua. Why? Even if they testify that say, we saw Reuven commit to giving 200 zuz to Shimon, the defendant would not be chayav to pay the money that he said he's going to have to pay. In Torah, you're not chayav to pay money just because you said I'm going to give you money. You're not a nice guy, but that's not a valid chiyuv unless you make a king. The chayil of this thing applies to all situations where when the Eidim are saying you would do something, that thing is not chayav money anyways. You're not chayav shvus edus. So again, you only chayav making a false shvus edus if the thing you would say and testify on would actually make someone have to pay someone money. In this case, it wouldn't make that happen, right? Gimel. If I demand that you testify on my behalf that I'm a Kohen or I'm a Levi, or that I'm not the son of a Ben Grusha, meaning that the rumor is that my father, who's a Kohen, married a divorcee, in which case I'm disqualified as a Kohen. Or my father, who's a Kohen, married a woman who underwent Chalitza, in which case I'm disqualified as a Kohen with the Rabbanon. And I want you to testify on my behalf that it's not true. The guy denies knowing anything. He swears to that effect, and he's lying. He does know for a fact that the person is a kosher Kohen. But Torah Mishra say this, he's potter from the Aveira of making a false Shua say this again, in kind of this moment. Because if I testify you're a Kohen, no one's chayav to give you any money. And then again, so again, the same principle over here applies. A chalitza is when a woman's husband dies without children, the living brother-in-law has to do chalitza to remove the shoe in order to let her marry somebody else. So the Chum forbade a Kohen marrying such a woman because she resembles a divorcee. Dalit. If a person says, you were there, you saw my son injure me, I want you to come testify on my behalf, and my son injured me, and my son should pay me the 5 damages. If you were there when this person licked my silo of wheat grain on Shabbos, come testify, he has to pay. You saw this person rape or seduce my daughter who is married. The chaf of an ishbu, and Ram says Mairasa, which means betrothal. The point is that she's married. And they deny and knowing anything, and they swear and they're lying about it. Paturmish was Edus, they are potter from she was Edus. Why? If the guy does testify to the effect, he's chayav hadid from Mrs. Bezdin. The person who's being testified, the defendant, who says that the witnesses say that he punched his father and he injured him, or he lit this person's house down, burned this person's house aside on Shabbos, or he did this prohibition with this married woman. In these cases, because there's a death penalty involved for Hilchos Shavuos, or a married woman living with a married woman, or a child who injures their parents is chayav misa. So, given that punishment, and he's absolved from the minor punishment of paying money. So, there's no chiv to pay. As we'll say in the laws of Naira. Same applies in illustration. Again, over here, on a technicality, even though the guy did monetary damages, he's exempt from paying the money because he's chayav misa. A person does one action that there's money involved as a punishment, and there's misa involved. The misa eclipses the money, and therefore it doesn't apply. If it's one aid that he saw the guy borrow money from me, and the aid says I never saw it, and he swears one witness doesn't have the power in turn to obligate the person to pay. You have to have two witnesses. One witness can obligate him to take an oath, but if he takes the oath and doesn't end up paying, you can't tell the guy, if only you would testify. I'm a mistake. So therefore, you can't make him pay. He's not chayav shus eidus, but you can't tell him, if you would come testify, the guy would pay me. It's not true. Maybe the guy wouldn't pay. Maybe make a shvua, and therefore you can't make him chayav shus eidus. If a person demands two witnesses come and testify on his behalf, that his wife was mizana, and she was unfaithful. The chaf of Rishma, they deny and they swear to that effect, and they're lying. You really didn't see what happened. They are chayav for making a false shus eidus. If they only come testify, as they know, they would cause you to lose the rights to ksuba money. The guy demanding they come testify wouldn't have to pay the money. It turns out they are denying testimony, which would not be mechayev anybody to pay anybody money, but it would save him having to pay her money. And therefore, he's going to end up having to pay her the ksuba money if he divorces her or he dies, and therefore it's money relevant. And therefore, the chayav, the false shus eidus. So over here, the chayav shus eidus, even though what they would say doesn't make anybody obligated money, but it helps someone save money, and therefore the chayav shus eidus. Zayin. The person says, "You witnesses, you saw me. You were there when I warned my wife not to seclude herself with this person," as in the classic case of Saita. Or the two witnesses who saw her break the warning and seclude herself with that person, and they say, "No, we didn't see anything," and they swear. They are potter from shus eidus. Why? If they would testify, there's no monetary obligation. All they would do is enable him to take her to Yerushalayim and force her to drink the certain waters. Even though in theory, if they only come and testify, maybe she would say, "I'd rather not drink. I'm not going to drink," and she walks away and loses the ksuba. So they are ultimately contributing, or they're playing a role in him having to pay the ksuba. Still, they're part of the davar shagreil the moment, and a moment, if in fact something which causes money is not considered like something which is money. It's possible she will drink, and she won't lose her ksuba. So we can't say that their refusal to testify is making her have to pay the ksuba, because who says? We don't know. Maybe she would drink the waters and she'd be fine, or she wouldn't be fine if she died. Maybe, but the fact is that the person would. I'm sorry, never mind. Yeah, right. So it's possible she would drink and she'd be innocent, and therefore you can't save these two guys if you lie. If only you come testify, I would save the money of having to get the ksuba. That's not necessarily the case. What if he warns his wife and she secludes herself and his witnesses? And so that's not a question. Now we know she has to drink the Shaita waters. After she was warned and secluded herself, there's one witness who actually saw her be commit infidelity. And he says to this one witness who saw it happen that he should come testify to that effect. The chafar and this aid denies and he swears. This one witness is chayiv to bring a carbon for making a false shus eidus. Even though he's just one witness, if he would come step forward and say that after she secluded herself in violation of the warning, she was actually unfaithful, she would get divorced and forfeit a ksuba. As we said in the laws of Seita, that because she violated the warning and secluded herself with this individual after being told not to, so even one single witness is believed to say she committed infidelity and she loses the ksuba. He's not believed to say she's chayiv misa and she gets stoned or killed. That's not the case. But he is believed to conclusively make her status as a zoina and she loses the ksuba. So because this one witness is not testifying, the guy is going to end up having a ksuba, and therefore his false edus. No. But over here, this is an exception. So that was halacha hey. We said is not number. But over here, the one aid is believed to say she was mizana lose ksuba. And if he would testify, that would be the case. Because his refusal to testify and his lying about not knowing any testimony, the guy is going to end up having to pay the ksuba. And therefore, this aid who lied about it is chayiv shvus eidus. Halacha tes. Again, remember the principle is that when the aidim say we don't know any testimony, we didn't see what happened, and they're lying. If they would not lie, if they would testify as they know, and they would make someone have to pay money or save money, then and only then are they chayiv shvus eidus. If there's a case where one witness, any other case besides this, where one witness, although it's not the norm, has the ability to force someone to pay, if he makes a shvua and he denies it and he's lying, or they administer an oath in Bezdin and he denies that, according to the Rambam, you have to administer the oath in Bezdin, yeah, or the denial has to be in Bezdin. And again, chayiv mishum shvus eidos. He's chayiv for taking the false shvus eidos. What's an example where one aid could force someone to pay? Ketzah, for example, right? Let's say, for example, you have the plaintiff and the defendant, and they're both shudin al shvua. Ruvain and Shimon are coming to a din Torah. Ruvain says Shimon owes him money. Now, Reuven and Shimon are both two kinds of Jews who, because of previous circumstances, we don't allow them to take an oath in Bezdin. They both had a track record. They lose their right to be trusted. Let's say they both, in different cases, have been caught red-handed testifying falsely, or they both, in the past cases, have been caught red-handed making a false shavua. We don't have to make a shavua. So Reuven, the liar, the ganiv, the gazlin, is taking Shimon the Gaz into a din Torah, and Reuven says to one witness, "Listen, you come testify. Shimon owes you money. I lent him money, right? Our last bank robbery together. He owes me a part, right? The chafar, and he denies. This one witness is chayiv the avera of making a false shvus eidos. If the witness would come and say, "Yeah, Shimon the Gazlin owes Reuven the Gazlin, the Shimon, the defendant, would have to pay the money, as we say because when one witness says to you, you owe him money, pay up, but it's only one witness, the defendant has to make a shavua, an oath, to contradict the testimony. Now, Reuven and Shimon are both not believed in testifying. So if Reuven was a ganiv, and we say Reuven is not believed to make a shavua, Shimon was the defendant was a ganiv, and he's not believed to make a shavua, what do? We say Shimon can't swear. The ball's in your court. Make the shvua and extract the money, or walk away. Now here, Reuven can't do either. He also can't make a shvua. So what do? We revert to the classic situation. This one aid is testifying. Reuven can't swear. Shimon can't swear. Shimon has to pay, as we'll explain in the laws of testimony. Therefore, this one witness in this particular scenario would be able, through his testimony, to make Shimon pay Reuven. And therefore, because he's not testifying, he's lying about what he knows. He's chayav shvus eidus as if he was two witnesses. The same applies in all situations. So again, Reuven says to Shimon, "You owe me money." He has one witness. Shimon has to make a shavua saying, "I owe you nothing." If Shimon declines to swear, he has to pay. That's his choice. Pay what you're demanding with the one he says you owe, or if you're not going to pay, if you don't want to pay, you have to swear. One of the two. Shimon can't make the shavua; he's a ganav, or he's a liar, and we don't trust him. So then Reuven has the choice of making the shavua and extract the money from Shimon, but he can't do it either. So therefore, what happens? If Reuven can't swear, Shimon can't swear. Allah is that because Shimon, the ball goes back to Shimon's court, he can't make the shvua, he has to pay. So this one aid would make that happen, but he's not testifying. He's lying about what he knows, and therefore, because he's lying about what he knows, he's chayev shvus eidus. A woman who says to one aid, "Come testify on my behalf that my husband died, therefore I can get remarried." The coffin refuses to chayev shvus eidus. This one witness again is chayev shvus eidus. Why? This one witness would testify that the guy died. The Chum would let her get remarried, and they would also therefore let her take collector ksuba. And therefore, this is another case where one aid has the ability to extract money or to let her take money from the Yarshim, from her Ksuba, and he's not doing it. Therefore, this Chayav Shus Eidus. Yud Medva Mamudim. When does this last case apply? Where he's Chayav Shus Eidus? Because if he would testify, she would get the money for a Ksuba. When the case was that she would collect a Ksuba from movable property. Remember, we said you're not Chayav Shus Eidus unless the money in question is movable property. It doesn't apply to karka, doesn't apply to slaves, doesn't apply to shtaris. So, for example, she, let's say, has in her possession her husband's, golden watch, and she would be able to come to Bezdin and say, I'm keeping this on behalf of for my ksuba, and they would let her keep it. However, the only option she has is to collect the ksuba from karka, land. He's a pater of Shus Eidus. This one witness is pater from the Shus Eidus, because even if he would testify and she would collect the ksuba, it would only be from land. And when someone denies knowing testimony that would cause someone else to have to pay karka, we said he's part of Shus Eidus because a kasuv that doesn't apply to karka, doesn't apply to shtaris or avodim. Now this case would be even if it was two witnesses, even two eidim who say we don't know, we didn't see the guy die, but they're lying. They'd still be part of Shus Eidus because even though she would get a ksuba, if they would only come forward and testify, the ksuba is karka. Therefore, it's not in the bounds of the parasha of Shus Eidus.
How do you think two is different than one?
It's a chiddush. You're right, you wouldn't, but I'm just adding emphasis to it. Because again, we said earlier that when you demand people testify on your behalf, and the thing that you'd be owed based on their testimony is karka, that is outside the bounds of Shus Eidus. Gimel. Okay, you give me a dalet. You give me a dalet. Basically, going to say that when two eidim make the shavua together, or they deny together, let's say at the same time that they know nothing, and they're really lying. They're both chayav the korban, right? Even if it's not mamash simultaneous, it's one after the other in succession. They're both chayav. But if there's a time lapse in between, in that case, the halacha changes. If one of them, however, admits and one denies, and the guy who admits he's saying what he's supposed to say. The person who denies, he's maintaining his denial. So then, if only he would testify, the guy would have to pay because he's chayav the korban alone. Let's say inside. If a person administers a shvu in Bezdin, they both deny and they say we know nothing. And simultaneous means that the other one basically denies he knows anything. So Reuven says I know nothing, and Shimon immediately afterwards, it's called Teich Dibur, within a few seconds, the amount of time it takes to say the words Shalom Lacharebi, he says I also know nothing. Shneim Pechiav and Shus Eidus, they're both chayiv the korban for making a false Shus Eidus. Each one brings his own korban. Call for her rishon. The first one says, "I know nothing over here," and he's lying. And the second one waits a few seconds, and he says, "Yeah, I also know nothing." And they're both lying. The first one is chayiv for the fact that he's denying falsely, knowing anything. The second one is potter. Why is the second one potter? The first one's chayiv for obvious reasons. Because if the first one would admit, like the second one admitted, the guy would have to pay it. But he's denying. And even though at the time he didn't know what the second one would do, it's irrelevant. The fact is they're a unit. When the second one says, but in this case over here, when they both deny, but it's a few seconds apart, the second person, if he would relent and say, "I do know what's happening," and change, he would not. Instead of lying, he would say, "Yeah, I saw what happened." His edus would not cause the person to have to pay, because once the first person denies and says, "I know nothing," and makes a shvut to that effect, he can't change that. He can't go back on that. So therefore, the second edus, even if the second person thinks and says, "You know what, I did see what happened," he's just 1/8. The first edus is irrelevant now. So therefore, his testimony would not cause the person to have to pay anyways. You doubt. One of them says, "I saw what happened." One of them says, "I did not see what happened." Now, they both saw what happened. The person who's lying, the person who denies is lying. The person who denies is lying, is chayav a korban. Whether he's the first or second. The Hilchos Gimel, they were both denying. They both said, we saw nothing. They're both lying. So if they're both simultaneous, they're both chayav korban chatas. If there's a few seconds in between, In the first one's chayiv, the second one's pater. Over here, one is admitting and one is not admitting. So the person who denies, the person who lies, he's chayiv a carbon chatas. As we'll see, to call the carbon early yoded, and the other person is not chayiv because he's admitting. If they both say, we know nothing, and one of them, and then simultaneously, and then immediately after, one of them says, I lied, I do know what happened. He's pater because he is now admitting. However, the person who maintains the denial, he's chayiv shus edus because if he would admit as well, now you have two witnesses, but you don't have two witnesses because he's maintaining his false denial. So in the previous halacha where I said once the guy says I don't know anything, he can't go back on that. That's if he tries to go back later. If he immediately relents and says I'm lying within a second or two, then he could go back. Okay, testify. If a person makes two separate groups of witnesses swear, so you have four people, right? Reuben and Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. So he says to this group of two witnesses, you guys saw what happened, and they deny it, and he says, swear to me. And he says to the other group of witnesses, you guys saw what happened, you should testify, and they also deny it, and they also swear. And both groups are perfectly legitimate witness groups. Again, the first group denies knowing anything. Then afterwards, he turns to the second group and says, "You testify," and they also say, "No, I know nothing." The first group is pater from the chiyuv of making a false shvus edus. Why? They could say, "We're relying on the other group that they would testify for you. We didn't know that by us not testifying, we'd cause you to lose the money. We thought the other group would testify." That you can extract the money based on this other group. They can testify for you. It comes out, this defendant would not be chayiv. You can't say that if these two guys would just testify, the guy would have to pay, and only because of their denial, that's why the guy's getting out of paying. It's not true, because even if they would testify. It's not only the testimony to Mechayivim, you have the other group that could possibly testify. So again, one of the principles of Shavuos Edus is it's their denial, and only their denial. Sorry, the opposite. It's their testimony, and only their testimony that's making this person have to pay. Because they're not testifying, he's not paying. Over here, even if they would testify, there's other factors involved that can be Mechayivim to pay. For example, the other agent. And therefore, you can't point to them alone as the cause of the person not having to pay, and therefore they're pater. That's the first group. The second group doesn't have that excuse, because once the first group says, I know nothing, and they make a shvua, they can't go back on that. And now the ball is in the court of the second group of witnesses. Because they're choosing also to not testify, them and on their shoulders alone lies the responsibility of the person not having to pay, and therefore the chayav for a shvua edus carbon. However, if the second group, for example, was possible edus, obviously the first group is chayiv because the second group is irrelevant. But the Rambam has now an interesting case to that. What if the second group was not disqualified because they were relatives to one of the litigants, to the bear, the defendant, or the plaintiff? Let's say they were brother-in-laws to their sisters. But anyways, just accept the fact that their sisters are in the throes of death. So after in that case, the first group is chayiv for the issue of shvus edus as well. Why? The second group, when the first group lied and said we know nothing, the second group was irrelevant. They were relatives. Relatives can't testify. Even though after a few minutes after the first group lies and says we know nothing, the second group will become fit witnesses because the wives will die and now they're not related anymore. Still, it doesn't make a difference. The fact that the Shas Ma'aser, when the first group testified, the second group is irrelevant, that makes him chayav for shvus edus. And therefore, a few minutes later, the chayav a carbon chatas for shvus edus. 5 minutes later, the wives die. Now the second group of witnesses are validated. They could testify. But they lie about it. They're also chayav shvus edus. So both groups are chayav. If the second group denies again falsely after the wives die, they're chayiv for Shavuos Eidus. Needless to say, whatever they're testifying about had to have happened before they married the sisters of these guys. Because if what they witnessed happened while they were puzzled, even though later they became kosher, their Eidus is not relevant. It's like a child who sees something happen. As an adult, he testifies. It doesn't count. The shas he saw it, he was puzzled. He was a child for most things. So they saw the guy lend money or borrow money, let's say. Then they married their sisters, and then this whole story happened. Okay, good. Tezayin. A person demands witnesses testify and they deny. He makes them make a shvu and they answer amen. And he again 4 and 5 times administers an oath to them again. And after each shvu they answer amen again and again. They deny. They keep answering amen outside of Bezdin. When they come into Bezdin, they say, yeah, it's true, we know testimony, and they say the testimony. They are part from Mishvus Eidus. We said that the Shavua, to deny testimony, is only relevant if you deny, the Shavua that you made is only relevant if you actually make a denial in Bezdin, either before or after the Shavua. Here, there's no denial in Bezdin. They come to Bezdin, they testify. Therefore, the Shavua is irrelevant as far as Shavuos Eidus goes. They probably have Shavuos Bidin. If, however, they walk into Bezdin and they maintain the denial, then they have to chayiv carbon chatos for each one of those 5 times that they made a shvua or they entered amen to a shvua outside of Bezdin. Yidzayin. When this is applied, the Rambam holds it has to be that they say amen to each one. In this case, to make you chayiv for each one individually. If they don't say amen, they just deny. They say, no, I don't know anything for each shvua. Each time the guy says to them, I administer an oath to you that you don't know testimony that Reuven owes me money. And they say, no, we don't know anything, but they don't say amen. Since they did not say the shvua, they just denied that the guy administered the shvua. Nor did they say amen. They are pater. They're pater unless they make the shvua in Bezdin, and over there they make a denial, as we explain in Perek Tes, Halacha Aleph and Yud. So, yes, even if they make the denial in Bezdin, no, so that's the word over here is they didn't make a denial in Bezdin. Yeah. The question is, what would happen? Because Rambam says the partner actually he has to make a shvua with them in Bezdin and they have to deny it over there. So here that didn't happen. Yeah, so in other words, the Rambam basically saying that even if they come into Bezdin and they deny anything, so they're not chayiv for the shvua they made outside of Bezdin, even though they denied, they basically didn't answer amen. Okay, he's being the Bezdin the kafu if he administers a shvua in Bezdin and they deny knowing anything. The chazav, but they don't say amen though. Apparently, the chazav is being and then he, after they deny in Bezdin the shvua, he administers more shvu, 4 or 5 more times shvuas to them, and they're kaifer on each one. Again, they keep denying. Whether it's inside or outside of Bezdin. And even if they after denying in Bezdin, they answer amen or they make their own shvua. They only have 1 shvuas eidus for the first one. Why? Because once they deny knowing anything in Bezdin, if they change their mind and say we do know something, Eidus somebody else klum, that Eidus is irrelevant. Right? Once they deny in Bezdin knowing any testimony, they can't change that. Therefore, every time after that, when they make a shvua, I swear I don't know any testimony for you. It's not like if they would say, yeah, I do know, that now they can testify and make that payment. They can't. So only the first one is the only relevant one. Therefore, the only chayav 1 carbon chatas. The test. In Tes Zayin, each time they deny, if they would relent and say, "Yeah, I do know," then they would be allowed to testify because they did deny in Bezdin. So each time they make a shavua, they're again preventing themselves from testifying, and therefore the chayav for each time. Okay, you test. Tells the laments. It turns out any shvu they make after they deny knowing testimony, and they make the denial in bezdin, even if they don't say amen. Excuse me. Yeah, those denials are denying testimony, which anyways can't obligate someone to pay money. Which they're part of Mishwas Edus. They are, however, chayav for Shavuos B'tei classic Shavuot. So just as we just said, basically, once you deny knowing anything in Bezdin and on the penalty of a Shavuot, now your Edus is invalid forever. Therefore, you can never change your mind. So whatever Shavuot you make after that is irrelevant. So therefore, only chayav won't cover chatas.